Hi, I'm Anthony Chapman, course developer and instructor at Point Blank. This tutorial video gives you a flavour of what you can expect on our music production courses in London, Los Angeles, Mumbai and online. Find out more about our courses at www.pointblankmusicschool.com. In this video I want to move on to looking at how I've used EQ and the strategies I've employed to get the most I can out of the recordings in the mix. Now, as I've said, it's really important to get balance done before you start applying, especially things like EQ and dynamics, because you need to hear how everything's working together. So once I've done my balance, I started to work my way through, started with the drums and the bass. So I quickly cherry pick a few examples of how I've used EQ. So if I look here on the first bass drum track, let's just solo this. Now, the quickest way to tell what effect my EQ is having is just to bypass it. So you can probably hear there, what I've tried to do is refocus the sound of the bass drum. So with the EQ off, it doesn't sound bad. It just sounds a little bit, it's a bit prominent in like the low mids especially. And then with the EQ, you can see here, I've high passed a little bit. I tend to do that a lot, because the really low frequencies, they don't need to be quite so prominent, so we can really start to roll those off a bit. Got a nice bump here because I really wanted to get some low frequencies out of the kick drum. 60 hertz or thereabouts is often the area where you're going to get the most poke from the bass drum. Now my low frequency here is set to 100 hertz and my high pass is set to 41.7 hertz. 12 dB an octave. I do like to get a little bit steeper than the default, which is kind of like that. But here's my philosophy. Whenever you boost in EQ, you create a debt that needs to be paid. So I always feel I have to mirror it somewhere else with a cut. And this frequency here, this low mid, I've got this at 135.9. If I bypass this, so here, the pitch of the kick drum almost changes a little bit when I take that out. So that area is quite important. And then similarly, with the mid frequencies here, I've got it about 673 hertz, and I'm just nudging a little bit out of it there. If I boost this up, this is something I often do a lot. If I really want to be sure about the frequencies that I'm working with, I'll boost it up like that. And you can hear that that's quite a sort of nasal sort of frequency. Then up here, boost on the top end. Because if you listen to it here, you can still hear the bass drum cut through, and that's really important. Let's run it back to the top. Now you'll notice that I don't process everything. And at the moment I'm also not even using this hi-hat mic here. So if you listen to this. So for me personally, I can take or leave that. But the one thing I would say about a hi-hat mic like that is, I would almost always roll off everything, maybe up to 1K, like is the default on this EQ one band, because none of that information really is going to be important on the mic. Also, I need to pan this to get it to mirror the stereo image of the drums, and I'm going to leave that in really quietly. The mix as I had it before, wasn't really using it. I don't really think it adds too much. Toms. One thing I always find with toms is that you really need to get some cuts in the mid, because the mid is very woolly and just doesn't sound like we imagine a tom would sound like until you take these cuts out. So let me just quickly find a point where the toms are playing quite prominently so I can try to illustrate what we're talking about. If I bypass this, it's less bright and it's also a little bit boxy and middly. And really that's more like we imagine toms to sound. Let's have a listen to the floor tom as well. So that's with the EQ. The difference is less pronounced on the floor tom, but it's still really, really important. Because all of those low mids are very, very congested frequencies in the context of a mix. So if we go back to the mixer, let's have a look at the bass here. And you can see with the bass DI, it's quite a simple EQ, but again, high pass, quite a boost in the bottom end, a little bit higher up than it was on the kick, and then a big cut in the low mid, centered around 200 hertz. That's quite a wide cut for me. Normally I go broad boosts, narrow cuts. But that sound on the bass is working quite nicely. So that's before. Much middlier. It doesn't really have that weight. That's more like it. Let's just take a look at the guitars as well. So, with the main guitar here, this is a strategy that I use a lot with regards to EQ and compression. We're going to come on to compression and dynamics processing in general in the next video, but generally speaking, when you compress something, you're going to make the quiet parts of it louder. But if you have problematic frequencies and problematic sounds and noise within the sound before it hits the compressor, then the act of compression is going to make these problematic sounds louder because they're usually quiet. If you think about hum and hiss and stuff like that. So I generally, in these kind of situations, will do cuts first, then do compression, then do any boosts that I need. So you can see here, if I bypass the compressor and the second EQ, so I've just taken out rumble down here and a little bit of muddiness here. And I've got the low mid at 200 hertz and the mid at 400 hertz, so it's an octave. So then I apply the compression, knowing that any problematic frequencies that were in there, like that low frequency rumble, have been addressed before it hits compression, so they don't inadvertently become louder. Then we have this second EQ where I've just high passed a little bit to be safe, but the most important thing is this high shelf here. And in Pro Tools, if you play with the Q, you can get that smooth shelf there.